Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Joy Lynn, and I'm with DMAI. So we're going to get started in just about a minute. I'm going to go over some housekeeping notes first. So today we'll be talking about building better stakeholder relationships, and I just wanted everyone to keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded. You will receive a copy of the presentation as well as the recording about 1 week after we finish the presentation. And also, if you would like to ask a question, we have Elaine Rosquist from DMAI on board today who's monitoring the question panel. So if you go to your GoToWebinar dashboard and go to the question pane, you can enter in any comments or questions there, and Elaine will be able to share that with the rest of the panelists for them to answer at the end of the presentation. So we'll go ahead and begin on time. So today, we're talking about building better stakeholder relationships. And so we all know that DMOs are really in the unique position to be an advocate for travel and tourism in their local community. And we'll be talking about that with our wonderful panelists. Valencia Bembry, Director of Accreditation Programs from DMAI. Hi, Valencia.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
And so Valencia actually joined us at DMAI in 2013 with more than 20 years in marketing communications and accreditation programs experience with a lot of different companies like the Human Resources Certification Institute, Intercontinental Hotel Groups, as well as Choice Hotels. And currently as director, she oversees the Destination Management Accreditation Program, or DMAP, which is over 180 DMOs strong and have complied with 58 mandatory and 30 voluntary standards for excellence in a multitude of areas, one of which is stakeholder relations. So we're really glad that Valencia is able to join us today. Also with us today is Michael Brown, who is the Director of Development and Public Affairs for Experience Columbus. Hi, Michael.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
So Experience Columbus actually earned an exemplary status from the DMAP board in stakeholder relations, and it is an organization that has gone from a $6.4 million budget in 2010 to an $11.3 million budget just last year. So congratulations, that is such a huge achievement, Mike. And so basically, Mike's role with Experience Columbus is that he's an advocate for building the community's brand and tourism economy. He's primarily focused on leveraging collaborations with private and public partners to raise the city's national image as a smart and open community. Mike joined Experience Columbus in 2010 after serving 11 years in the mayor's office as communications director and policy advisor, and he still remains very active in the Columbus community today. So let's go ahead and get started. This discussion comes at a very timely point because earlier this month we celebrated National Travel and Tourism Week, as you know, and for 1 week every year, destinations across the U.S. are touting really the power of travel and tourism as a serious business with serious effects, not only with our economy, but also our personal health, our relationships, and learning. And there are a lot of advantages to making advocacy, really just engaging stakeholders in supporting the tourism industry a year-round activity. And so the question we discussed today really is, how do we do that in the everyday? And if we're talking about goals, a lot of destinations, we see our goal as making sure our destination is business ready. We put a lot of effort into getting visitors to come to our destinations, and we want to make sure that our destinations are prepared to receive that business. Which brings me to a quote that I just love from Carl Wilgus of the Poconos Mountains Visitors Bureau. And he says that their primary focus is tourism marketing and sales, but second to that is advocacy, because it's the opportunity to advance the tourism industry, to get all your stakeholders aligned and ready to receive the business you're bringing in, and managing stakeholder relationships is a primary key to that. So jumping right in, step one is to target your stakeholders. The DMAP standard in stakeholder relationships puts our stakeholders into some primary buckets. So Valencia, being the DMAP expert on our, you go ahead and share a little bit about the different buckets that we have here.
Thanks, Joy. Most of you are kind of familiar with these buckets, and if you look at the slide here, it covers the government, community partners, and industry partners. Many DMOs may also be a part of the city or county government, so of course that would not be a direct stakeholder, it would be your employer. But if you're not a department of a city or local government, then the government would truly be a vertical that you would want to make sure that you have a working relationship with. Community partners range from business organizations, your Chamber of Commerce, arts and cultural organizations, and especially economic development agencies. So when you're looking at your stakeholders, you want to kind of understand how that relationship, can be a win-win for both organizations. And then you have industry partners, and these are the partners that your guests that visit your destination will be interacting with the most. So you want to make sure that, as Joy mentioned, that in this area that your stakeholders and your destination is business ready to receive those guests to give them the best experience at your destination.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's all about identifying those winning relationships within your community too.
Exactly. And lastly, you would have the media, which as we have here is kind of sort of it goes across all of these different stakeholder buckets, because regardless as whether you have a very positive or very challenging relationship with these components of your community, the media is going to report on that. So you want to make sure that you have a really, really good relationship with your media partners at your destination, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be communicating your message as well as helping craft your brand image. So make sure that that's a strong win relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In Columbus, we had a challenge, and we had become a nonprofit that was kind of a, oh, hey, you guys, you're doing good work, you're just fine over there. And as an organization, we're not the biggest organization on earth, and there's a lot of stuff going on in a city like Columbus. I'm sure everybody out there has that same problem, but we had to come back and show the community how important this sector was. And you got to look at these people. You've got to have those relationships. And working in hospitality, it comes from the heart. But we do this job every day, so we think people get it. And the fact is, people totally think they get it, but they really don't. And they don't, if they're distracted by the stuff, they're going to do what they're focused on. We came back and put a specific strategy together to cross these buckets and find thought leaders in the community, not just because they had the title, but who's actually helping drive economic development? Who is the power center behind the government funding, the private sector funding, and then also who possibly is not on our side? And in Columbus, we had created a culture over decades in which the arts community, the human services community, and our community, kind of the nonprofit travel and tourism, they were all funded from the same pot of money, and therefore treated each other as adversaries. And one of the first things we did when we launched this new campaign of kind of rebuilding our base was going to those people who had been seen as political adversaries for finances, break down the walls, get all of our presidents and boards together, and talk. And it's more of less a monthly basis now that we've been doing it for a couple of months. We have monthly marketing meetings across our teams, monthly sales meetings, and we truly work together on how can we each serve each other's interests and grow the entire industry, not just find funding for next year's cycle.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned a lot. You talked a little bit about how sometimes some of your stakeholders may be unexpected, or they may be unknown, and you find yourself creating alliances within your community that may not be listed here. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of those examples?
It's so critical. It is so critical. And, within any system, within any town of any size, there's going to be groups who congregate. They have shared interests. And there had been sort of an attitude with the travel and tourism industry that we talk to people who live the next state over. We talk to people who are 3 hours away, but we don't spend much time talking to our own neighbors here in town. And they'd let walls get built up. We had to tear those walls down. And you'll find that even people who run, that theater downtown, that historic theater that almost every town has, they may not be talking to your team at all, and suddenly you have no content. You don't have an authentic relationship to get the best stuff within your marketing program. And that's just one example. But if you're not talking to the basic allies who could be on your team, what is it that you're really marketing? Are you marketing just an idea of a city? As I always say, we don't market Experience Columbus. We market the Columbus experience. What is that? And you've got to go find those people who are interested in doing cool stuff. And if you raise them up through your tools, they're going to be more likely to be an advocate for you when it comes to funding time and other decisions.
Very good information.
I like what you bring up in identifying, not just those people with the titles, but those who are really going to make an impact. Because, as DMO professionals, we all wear many hats. There's not enough time in the day, and not all relationships are created equally. So, which brings us to step 2, which is prioritizing your relationships. Depending on your stakeholders' level of power, as well as the level of interest that they might have in the travel and tourism industry, it gives us perspective on how much time and what activities we should be engaging with them. So basically, in terms of DMOs, they may have different stakeholders targeted in their strategic plans. So Valencia, can you share a little bit about how stakeholders are different?
Oh, absolutely. So I think when you think about your stakeholders, the first thing I'd want to add is that identifying your stakeholders and understanding your stakeholders and having a plan for your stakeholders should be something that's thought of early on in your strategic planning process. As you're sitting down thinking about how you're going to have the greatest impact on that destination and all the different things that you're going to do in marketing communications and business development, you want to think about those relationships. But the thing to remember is that different stakeholders will become a priority at different times. It depends on, the type of DMO that you have and what your immediate objectives are versus your long-term objectives. And you may find a stakeholder that can kind of, go through all of these quadrants, at different times. So understanding, where these stakeholders fit and which ones you need to, in the present time, make a priority is something that would be part of kind of the planning process and understanding your stakeholder community.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Mike, who's kind of a VIP for Experience Columbus and why?
Well, I think traditionally there'd been a lot of focus on hospitality industry leaders, hotel general managers, attractions. We have Jack Hanna's Zoo here in Columbus. We have some great assets, and we love it. But there had been a lot of people in the industry represented by the board. And at the end of the day, while they're all important partners and members of our group, they weren't writing the checks that paid for the marketing and sales work. The majority of our funding comes through a bed tax, like so many other places, and those funds were getting siphoned off to other groups. A fundamental challenge we had to attack, and one of the things we did was, well, who is overseeing these funding decisions? And we put more of those individuals, or the people who influence our political leaders, on our board. We brought them in, we engaged them in our planning process, and we made them feel that emotional ownership where now they fight for us. So that includes our city council president's chief of staff, our mayor's chief of staff, our mayor's communications director. All 3 of them are on our board, as well as the chief of staff for our Franklin County commissioners. So by pulling those 4 in, they are always at the table when big decisions are made, and they get to hear the input, the perspective of industry folks. And there was a lot of, let's say, questions about that move when we first proposed it. But the fact is, by bringing them in, it's the classic thing, you have them at the table and you get them to take more ownership. And again, I'd say you also have to look at some of those unexpected stakeholders who you didn't know might be paying attention or should be paying attention. Because as we find, while there are CEOs for all these businesses, there are also people behind those CEOs who are helping make civic decisions. And having those people who make civic decisions, those kind of community thought leaders, having them engage in your mission. It's huge. We have a person here who runs our community foundation, and he really passionately cared about the storytelling about the city. So by engaging him in our process, we then brought all of his creativity, but all his relationships as well. So we took him from a monitor into more of a manage closely, and it had a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the idea of making sure to remember that these stakeholders are fluid, and so depending on how you engage them, you can actually move them from one quadrant to another and make them more interested by engaging them first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. Great. And so step 3 is about showing the potential. I mean, we can always start from a baseline about what you're doing and the impact that we currently have, and reporting is always going to be important. But to initiate change and to really light that fire, Mike's going to show us in a little bit, is that you have to paint the vision and show what's possible. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mike here to talk about exactly how they did that at Experience Columbus.
I think we all pay a lot of attention to our metrics, our numbers. How are we doing performance-wise? Who are our peers? How are they doing, in occupancy, RevPAR, but also the overall economic impact. We had done some studies in the past and gotten 30 or 40-page documents back and PowerPoints that were incredibly boring, and that stuff was not motivating. And it's not good enough to put that in an annual report and have it sit on a shelf. So one thing we did very early in this process, kind of when we were starting to create the new Experience Columbus, was break things down as simple as possible. And I think the slide you have up right now, that page is just about visitor spending impact. We all kind of get it. We all get reports that show what we're doing locally. But to make it that simple so I can hand that to all of my city council members, my county commissioners, their economic development people, and, by the way, hoteliers, restaurateurs, and everybody say, this is why it matters. We need to grow this. So that's how we started getting their attention again when we were trying to knock on the door. Then we did a second study working with Oxford Economics, Tourism Economics, about what the potential of the market is based on our facilities, our size, our location, and the trends, because they've been doing our studies for many years, the trends. So we actually had them do a study, and they came back with a report on how much potential growth we had in this market. Now that we've got their attention of the elected leaders, the corporate leaders, we say, this is where we could be going. This is low-hanging fruit. Now, I think you guys probably remember that 2010 wasn't the best year in the business. 2009 was horrible. So we're talking about economic development with people who care passionately about economic development, people who are obsessed about bringing in great companies or bringing in tech entrepreneurs or bringing in venture capital. They work on these things every day, but in their own backyard, they had this travel and tourism industry that was ready to grow, ready to go with specific job creation, specific tax impacts, actual private sector and public sector return on investment. We had to go in and make that case. This is the low-hanging fruit of economic development, and you've already built the infrastructure. We've built the convention district, the arenas. The convention center has been upgraded. The bricks and mortar are done. Let's talk about the sales and marketing. Let's finish this task. That became a compelling argument in the community, and we were able to get corporate leadership and political leadership to buy in and actually help us put together what we call the aspirational plan, which I think they'll flip to in a slide or so. We were able to get civic leaders at many levels to look at what our goals were, frame them, and take ownership of it, and we put those into 6 basic priorities. That was a huge change for our community. Suddenly, there were stories in the paper. There were editorials in the paper. The mayor spoke about this mission in his annual State of the City address. Not 1 year, but the last 3 years. It became a thing, and we were able to rally the community behind these priority areas. And to be able to do that in 4 years is really, for me, like one of the reasons we're so proud of this organization right now. We're hitting on the cylinders. But it took a lot of leadership. It took a lot of collaboration, and it took us being able to knock on the doors with this economic development message to bring it back to funding a travel and tourism campaign. And we're just now in the very beginning of that. So in the next 4 or 5 years, you'll see that roll out more and more.
And you bring up a very good point, Michael, because the planning process in terms of how you're going to not only demonstrate your value to the destination, but what you guys were able to successfully do with Experience Columbus was actually put a return on that investment, right, in very, very clear terms that your stakeholders could understand not only how you were returning that investment to the community, but how they were also able to take advantage of that investment as well. So, that's really, really a big part of it, just making sure that you have the plan. And again, as I said earlier, the plan needs to, the stakeholder relationship, the model needs to be thought of early on in the planning process and not necessarily as an afterthought. And I think that's where you guys were able to really, really maximize, those relationships and bring that return to your destination as a result.
Yeah, we actually had to drive a process. We had to get it into the minds of the members of council and the mayor and other people that there's a problem here, that we're coming out of a bad economy and we're fundamentally missing an opportunity to grow the economy. This is a problem. And I got to drop the reform word, which I used a lot back in the day. I mean, we need to reform this system. And that's one of the reasons it was so important that we had the arts community on our team and the human services community on our team. And I'm never going to say that's never comfortable, but they now are on our team. We're all working together because they agreed that it's not working for any of us. The funding system doesn't work. The impacts that we're having doesn't work. And at the end of the day, we're not getting the return for the community, so that means all of us are falling farther behind. They got that. So that's one reason we were able to build momentum behind this plan. And then we basically sat people down 3 times to build this aspirational plan. We had 3 multi-hour meetings where we just had it out. We hashed it out. We listened. We took all kinds of feedback and criticism, but from civic leaders, from the president of the chamber, the representatives of the top CEOs, mayor's chief of staff again, all these other people were in the room, and we just hashed it out. We had some of our top hotel leaders in the room and others, but we said, where are we trying to go? And that is how we got this aspirational plan put together. And I think the 6 priorities are the same kind of things that every community wants to work on, but we were able to frame it in a way that Columbus leadership bought in. Make it Columbus, that's basically how we get our CEOs, our college professors, to bring the events of their membership here to Columbus. Collaborative brand marketing. If you look at the bottom of that screen where you can see Experience Columbus's logo and the Greater Columbus Sports Commission's logo, you'll see that Columbus with the U.S. broke out. In the last 3 years, we've got more than 3 dozen local groups to take on that same style of logo in their own marketing materials. It's things like that where it's not just us telling a story about travel and tourism, but now we're talking about the brand of a community working together. But these things are actually happening now. Enhancing the visitor experience, that's what we do every day, but how do we get our partners to invest in that, whether it's transportation through connectivity, better hotel packages, technology upgrades, infrastructure capital. Experience Columbus, we don't build anything, but we certainly take the most pleasure out of seeing new parks open, new concert facilities open, and then membership and partnership. We wanted our stakeholders and some people who thought of themselves as our opponents even to see themselves as partners. This isn't just about them writing an annual check to be a part of our team. This is about them feeling a sense of ownership. So those are the 6 areas we really wanted to drive forward. Kind of in a humble way, we built local pride. And that local pride building through this process has allowed us to get the engagement we needed.
Yeah, Mike, I really like how you have been able to bring people in to help create the plan so that they're able to fund the plan and eventually execute on it. You build buy-in from the very beginning, which is so important. So step 5 really, and Michael covered a little bit on this already, is about covering your communications channel by engaging, executing, and really sharing your success. And so I'm going to cover this pretty quickly because I think we're all pretty familiar with our marketing communications channels because that's what we do. But depending on exactly where your stakeholders are, there's a multitude of ways to do this. And so I'm going to let Mike share a little bit about what they've done at Experience Columbus to make sure their stakeholders are engaged from the very beginning.
Yeah, just some examples here. In the middle, you see the CTA button. In the past year and a half, we've trained 1,300 CTAs, including our mayor, every staff member over at City Council, people who work at the airport, hotels, everyone. It's been great. On the top right, you can see a picture from our annual meeting. It's a little bit small, but there's 20 performers on the stage, as well as our mayor, our top county commissioner, our top city council member, business leaders, and that's the wrap-up of our annual meeting. Our annual meeting is a show. It is a full production where we show 800 to 1,000 people what we do and why it matters. So that's engaging right there. You put the mayor on the stage with the graphics. That's a lot of fun. They enjoy that. But engaging local TV personalities, building easy-to-use products so that anybody can join in, whether it's the YouTube channels, the Instagram channels now. These are simple things. At the bottom, I'd also like to point out the 200 Columbus cupcakes, our bicentennial, hit in 2012. So this process started in 2010. We built into 2012. This wasn't a done deal yet, but we took a lot of ownership of the bicentennial, which put us front and center with the local leadership in a way we really weren't normally, because like as we said, we talk to people out of town and bring them in. But by owning a local project, our bicentennial program, we got to do a lot of local civic stuff and really impress people, show leadership, show local commitment and pride, and then all of our pieces of the other pieces came together through 12 and into 13 that we're launching now.
So Mike, just to wrap up a little bit about your journey, can you just distill it into just 5 steps for the audience today?
Joy and Valencia asked me to put together 5 steps, and so I just kind of threw these down. Educate, engage, embrace, enact, and enjoy. Educate, we get obsessed about what we do every day. We love our jobs. We're passionate about our communities. But the fact is, if you're doing one of these other leadership jobs, you're busier than heck. You don't have time to know all the ins and outs. They don't know. And don't hold it against them because they don't know. They've just never spent that day in your shoes. You can engage them, though, and they will care about it. The good civic leaders, they do care about every issue under the sun. How do I get that extra 2% of their time and energy? Through engagement so that they then embrace it. Bring the unexpected allies in. Bring in some of the crazy people in your community, whether it's in the arts or food, fashion. There's crazy people out there who are doing good stuff, and you want to use them. Don't be afraid of that. Enact, we took our changes that we were proposing, a whole reform package, and legislatively changed the way we get funded. This is not a little deal. This is not a one-time hit. We changed the bed tax code in the city of Columbus, and that was one of our asks. If we're going to do all this work for the community, if we have all this potential, it needs to be real. It has to be a multi-year commitment. Make it permanent. And then enjoy. This is the fun part of economic development. There's no reason for us to be overly crazy serious, or as I've seen in some communities, even a little bit, I think, perceived as on the whiny side, always asking for money, but people don't quite get what the return is for the community. This is fun. We are fun people in a fun business. We might as well look like we're having a great time.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And so I'm going to leave the final slide for Valencia, who was so great to join us today and bring Mike on board with the DMAP program. So just a few words about the accreditation through DMAI.
Sure. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the accreditation program, we have some information here about where you can go and learn more. You can go to the destinationmarketing.org website and look for the DMAP page, and there you'll find a host of information about the standards and the eligibility and the timeline. For those of you who are accredited organizations, thank you so much for joining this. We've heard from you all that you want to see more presentations like this from DMAI, and we're looking to kind of bring, the experts, that will be you guys, like Mike, to come and share their experience, real-time experience, and about what they've been able to accomplish at their destination. And as always, if you ever have any questions about accreditation or the program, feel free to contact me there. There's my email. Thanks again for joining, everybody.
Thank you. And so we are right at 2 o'clock, so if you can stick around for some questions, I'm going to open it up to Elaine to see if we can get any responses to you guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone. This was wonderful. Mike, just a quick question that came in towards the beginning of your presentation, and that is, do the board members that you were talking about have voting rights on your board? So initially,
Yes.
when you were, yes, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. You want them to feel like they are not just an interested party, but that they have a stake in your future success. So we did it in their full board members. And there was some discussion on that as to whether or not there was, do you create a side category like an advisory board? And I'm like, no. They will know exactly what you're doing. These people are on other boards. They get it. If you want them to serve, you have to make them full voting members.
Great. Thanks, and we have a few more questions coming in. So how did the bed tax change, Mike?
We have a percentage of it, and the percentage was increased from, I think we had a floor of 1.5 out of 10, the 10% bed tax. So we got about $1.50 for every $100 hotel bill, and now we get about $2.30, if that makes sense.
That's
It was
huge.
nearly a doubling of the percentage that comes to us. The arts community, and one of the ways we negotiated through the deal at the end of the day, is the arts community also saw an increase. The social services also saw a small increase. And all three groups, we had the three buckets of interest parties, we all had responsibilities, things we had to live up to in the next decade to the city for funding, but in return we would get these percentages of increased funding. And then the city, which had originally taken a slice of it out and kept it for their own operations, basically the city gave up their slice of the bed tax, which is huge. We were able to talk our city leaders into giving up a revenue stream, which you guys know how rare that is. But we should show them how it was an investment in a mission.
Great. One other question that came in was, how long did the road take to grow to the 11 million?
That would have been in the 11, 12, 13, and 14 budgets. So 4 cycles. Okay. But the first year was they gave us a little bit of temporary patch money. Basically, they gave everybody a little bit of money to say, stay in this process. We're going to keep fighting through this process. And they actually made us do a blue ribbon commission that studied all of our work and vetted it and had accountants involved. We all came in and showed our books, if you will, and said, this is where we are, this is where we should be. And through that process of about a year of study, then in the 12 and 13 budget cycles, they made the actual code changes that now have us at that level.
So you kind of proved yourself along the way. That's great.
That's right. They definitely kept everybody's feet to the fire during the process, and that was one of the things I actually really enjoyed because it brought in, our board chair sat on this process. The top 3 arts people all sat in on the process, and it really brought us all together. Not a single one of us now in all these different leadership groups have any problem calling each other anytime now. Every day of the week we're talking to somebody saying, hey, and at the end of the day you find then, well, hey, we can help then do job creation with this human services agency. We can help do recruiting over here. And oh, by the way, we have these 10 artists doing this awesome project that we never would have known about. Let's put that into one of our experiential tours when a group comes into town. The amount of new content that it has brought us, just by being a better community player, has been huge. And you'll see that reflected in our new marketing. This is actually a whole new flavor for Columbus. You're going to see a much more youthful, creative, funky side of Columbus, and it's the kind of stuff that we're finding through these processes.
Very cool.
That's great. That actually kind of answered this last question, but the one last question is, with your increase in budget, has Columbus been tapped into to fund startups, some of the economic initiatives, for example, some infrastructure?
No. These resources and the list of things that we had to do in return included things like developing the civic brand, not just for us, but for the entire community. So everything that we're using the new resources for is mission-oriented, even if it's slightly off what maybe our traditional message was thought to be. Because we've always done marketing, but brand development for an entire community it's a little more detailed than marketing if you're into this stuff. I'm not just marketing my zoo, my food, my hotel package. Now I'm talking about the culture and spirit of a city through other channels in ways that support my marketing, but also support what Ohio State University is doing and what the mayor is doing, what the chamber is doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because one of the things that you said early on is that, that you're marketing the experience of Columbus, right? And all of those pieces make up the experience of Columbus. So again, demonstrating the importance of having those relationships so that you're understanding what those experiences are as well.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. So I just want to extend a very warm thank you to Valencia and Mike for joining us on this very important topic today. And so just to wrap up, again, this webinar was recorded, and so we'll be sending a follow-up message with the presentation as well as a link to the recording to all of the attendees for you to share back in your own cities. So thanks for joining us, and thank you, Valencia, Mike, and Elaine.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.